Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of That Early Childhood Nerd. I'm Heather Bernt-Santy. I'm very excited. Kisa Marx is here. Hi, Kisa.
Hello, how are you?
I'm okay. We've been
Mhm.
talking about having this conversation for a while. It seems like it just
Yes.
hasn't worked on either side of it for us for a while. But
Hmm.
I want to talk with you about this piece you wrote for Exchange called A Letter to Educators Surviving the Childcare Crisis that went out early in the year, January,
Hmm.
February, right?
Yeah.
Um, so to sort of summarize, it's a reflective piece that you wrote, and a challenge, sort of a reflection and a challenge.
Hmm.
I read it with a group of students this semester, and it was really powerful. And I was like, I've got to just have Kisa talking about this too.
Yeah.
So thank you for doing that. So let me read a little bit from kind of the beginning, and then I'll let you talk a little bit about the piece.
Okay.
But you wrote, your opening paragraph is some stress and some things that came up during COVID,
Hmm.
that sort of were challenging for you. Not sort of, were challenging for you.
Yeah.
And then you wrote, for months I swallowed these conflicting thoughts because I thought that's what we caregivers do, right? We hang our problems up at the door and put on happy faces as calmly as Mr. Rogers donned his inside shoes and cardigan. However, I found that there were many breaches in the system. Concerns began to drip and drop in, threatening my ability to stay afloat. And then some of the concerns you list are like safety concerns, physical distance that impacted connections, just the logistics of your day versus the relationships and the care that you wanted to focus on.
Hmm.
Commodification crept in, reducing care to checklists and services rendered rather than relationships to be nurtured. Inequity seeped in, turning care into a transactional exchange rather than a shared experience. And then finally, burnout. So,
Hmm.
with that as a starting point, I guess what do you want to say about how you came to write this and what you meant by that part, and then we'll see where we go here.
So the first thing I want to say is that I feel so much gratitude about this piece being seen because I wrote it from the most vulnerable, raw
Mm,
part in me that I would have never shared. And
mhm.
it was, you know, writers writer's gonna write. And I
Yeah,
had to get
yeah.
it out, and on a whim, I just sent it in.
Uh-huh.
And so the fact that it was picked up meant so much to me because it kind of validated
Mhm.
those feelings that it was very isolating when I was feeling them.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah,
So,
and it really has
um,
resonated. Like I see it
yeah.
popping up everywhere.
Mhm.
So I
Mhm.
think that we all feel that isolation, and that's one of the
Yeah.
good things about technology and social media, that
Yes.
we can kind of
Yes.
move ourselves out of that isolation a little bit.
And not feel like we're doing it alone.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it started, as with anything, that's collective, it started, or cumulative, it started during the pandemic. And one of my toxic traits is masking.
Mm,
So all of this went on, and instead of I think it's a caregiver's way to just be like, "We can take it. We can take it. We can do it.
yeah.
We can do it. Oh, this is fine. This is fine." And so when all of the changes were coming through and I had to let go of a staff of 4 and I had to work with, at first 13 kids by myself. And then they were like, "Oh no, only the first responding kids can come." And so then it dwindled down, but I was still by myself and we had like nowhere to go. Um, I just kept pretending, "This is fine. This is
Yeah.
fine." Like, we only closed for 2 days
Yeah.
because I had so many first responders. So like, the 2 days that they went on lockdown, like, the first 2 days, and
Mhm.
then that Monday, I was open again. And so there was never any downtime, and then every time a policy changed, I had to change with it, every just back and forth like a revolving door. And, I thought I took that on the chin. I thought I did
Yeah.
so well, and that's heavy on the thought because what happened was the years went by and protocols kept changing and they got more and more lenient, but that relationship gap was so huge.
Mhm.
And I felt like I was on the teeniest, tiniest island in the world by
Mhm.
myself trying to deal with it. And so by what was that, 2023, I believe, is when I actually crashed and burned. So
Mhm.
all that time I
Oh
had just
God.
been taking
Yeah.
all of those things and it was wild. And so writing about my burnout was very cathartic for me, but I felt like it was would only be fair to say where it came from.
Mhm.
It didn't just come from the pandemic, it was actually before the pandemic. The
Right.
pandemic was probably the straw that broke the camel's back. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, that's where my mindset was. It was on, the fact that we are often seen as just the help, the fact that we are seen we're othered, right?
Mhm.
Like, "Oh, I can't take my child to school, but my child's gonna go to daycare. They don't matter."
Yes.
They
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. And then
You
the
know?
flip at the end when schools started opening and teachers in elementary schools were like, "I am not daycare."
Yes,
You know, it
yes,
it was
yes.
very clear where we really
Mhm.
stood,
Yeah, where we
um,
stood,
in
and,
that.
uh, that stung, in a place where I hadn't ever considered. I always took, great pride in my work. I always took great pride in the work that I've done, but then once I felt kinda disposable,
Mhm.
it was the nastiest feeling.
Right. Both essential and disposable at the same
At the
time, it
same
felt like, yeah.
time, and yeah,
Mhm.
and, it didn't feel like and this could have been a feeling and not a fact, but it did not feel like, the families that I was serving at the time valued me as much as they valued their time and what
Mhm.
they needed to do.
Yeah.
And so again, that felt very othering.
Yeah.
And I know that everybody was spinning. Everybody was trying to figure out what to do, but because of the way that childcare is commodified and children are commodified, it
Mhm.
just felt like, "Here, take them, take them, take them," and you
Yeah.
can't even go inside, like, you're literally throwing your children in, like, bags or
Well,
Amazon packages, you know? "Take them and go,"
yeah, yeah.
and yeah, so that's
Mhm.
the long version of where that came from.
Yeah. I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head. I've heard
Mhm.
so many people talk about this, and I felt it myself that these are things that were already an issue with our work. And
Yeah.
COVID didn't cause it. COVID
Mhm.
magnified it and
Yes.
and
Mm,
forced us to think about it and talk about it, and because we were experiencing it at such a
mhm,
more intense level
mhm. That we
than
couldn't
before.
mask, it was nothing we could hide.
Right,
Mhm,
right, right. And we were all spinning, um,
mhm.
but I don't know that we spun out of it in
No,
a very healthy way
no. We
either.
learned to cope.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. So you talked the next piece you start a paragraph saying what I found among the debris were receipts of transactions that had been wrapped in the term care, and you quote Carol who says sometimes care can be uncaring, and
Yes.
you talk
Mhm,
about the work of care becoming transactional.
mhm.
So I just would like to hear you expand on that a little bit.
So, this comes from another story too.
Okay.
When the second wave of COVID hit,
Mhm.
I got sick. It was Christmas, and I got sick, and basically the families that I had, it was a coup. They was like, "How dare you get sick and have to
Oh no.
close?" And yeah, like one parent accused me of hiding the fact that I had COVID. And I'm a very high integrity person. So I
Hmm.
was deeply offended by that.
Hmm.
Like if you knew me, you would
Right.
know one, I'm a germaphobe. And two, I would never, ever, ever,
Yeah.
risk my family's and my baby's lives like that, because this was early on. People were still dying at great speed. So I was so offended by that. And it occurred to me at that point how transactional it
Hmm.
had been, with people dropping off at the door. I had a family that I had served since 2019 that I realized I hadn't had a full conversation with,
Oh,
and
wow.
it was about to be 2022.
Mhm.
Their child had been coming every single day, 5 days a week, and I had never had, other than hi and bye, we had never had a conversation.
Yeah.
And so I didn't think of it as, "Oh, these horrible parents." I thought, "Oh, like, you dropped the ball here.
Oh,
You were being transactional with your parents just as they were being transactional with you."
yeah.
And, I thought about how uncaring that was because I couldn't connect with them. They couldn't connect with me. They didn't know I was high integrity.
Mm. Sure,
Oh,
yeah.
yeah. So they
Yeah.
knew that I took their children in. And
Mhm.
so I started to realize the responsibility that I had to be more caring in my care. If I valued care, then I better act like it.
Yeah.
I better act like these things are important to me. Then I'm taking care of not only your child, because that was a phrase that I constantly use that makes me cringe. Like, I love your child. That's the most
Uh-huh.
important part. But it kind of stopped. Literally, when that child crossed the threshold, I care for your child. You can go on somewhere.
Uh-huh.
And so I started to realize those values needed to show that care. If I cared about that child for real, then I needed to care for their parents,
Uh,
their families, and everyone else. And it needed to show.
yeah.
And
I've
so,
heard
yeah.
I've
Hmm?
heard people, both people that worked for me and people in classes who will say, I got into this to work with children, not the grown-ups.
Yep.
And it
Hmm.
just doesn't work that way.
It just doesn't,
So
and
to
I was able to
include
hide it.
families in your care ideas,
Yeah.
I think is powerful.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was able to hide it for so long because I have a very reserved, introverted personality, so I always had staff that was really extroverted, so I could fall back and let them do all of that.
Uh-huh.
But when it was just me, it was like, "Okay, you have to grow up in your leadership because it's nobody else. It's just you." So
Oh, wow. So that's really interesting to think about that as leadership.
yeah.
I just had well, I was interviewed on a podcast in Australia that focuses on
Mhm.
leadership, and
Mhm.
one of her goals, Amy Fabry, one of her goals
Mhm.
is to kind of show that you don't have to be necessarily the boss of something to be a leader, and it's not just
Mhm.
when we're talking about leadership in our profession, it's not just your title. Um,
Yeah.
so when you
Yeah.
talk about being a leader in that context, um, I mean, I just think that's really powerful that
Mhm.
leadership is whenever we decide to take the lead about something.
Yes. Yes, and it
Um,
can be things that are extremely uncomfortable. That's
yeah,
uncomfortable to me, and
yeah,
I had to stretch myself to do
yeah,
it. Mhm.
yeah.
Mhm.
Um, so you said there can be beauty in starting over. You have a chance to create a new system, building upon the ideas that truly matter while discarding those that threaten to take you down all over again. And I love that. I've said this a bunch of times and people are probably tired of it, but I really was hoping that when we got to the end of the lockdown part of COVID, the
Yeah.
really scary, intense
Scary.
year when we were
Yeah.
all spinning, as you said.
Mhm.
I really had hope that that could be like the United States, our Reggio Emilia moment, because
Yeah.
that's what Reggio did, right? It was war, which isn't the same, but it was still,
Mhm.
an intense period of destruction
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
and intensity and trauma. And that community had the opportunity to say, what do we really value when we
Mhm.
rebuild? Let's think about what we really value. And they decided that was education and children. And they literally used the bricks from the buildings that had been destroyed by bombs to rebuild
Yeah.
these schools. And I thought this could be it for us. This could really be that moment. And instead, we
Mhm.
started spinning out about learning loss.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
So
fighting about who matters in education and stuff. And so that reading that in here took me to that. And you even talk about bricks at some
Mhm.
point too. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. So I still believe that's true.
okay.
I don't believe in coincidences. I
Uh,
believe that this was like the prelude to our Reggio Emilia. I believe
uh-huh.
what we're
Oh,
living
we're
through
still maybe
right
there.
now is
Okay.
is go time.
Uh-huh.
But I believe that as Americans, and the systems, how deeply entrenched they are.
Yeah.
Like it took us 1 to 5 years to see the point
Yeah.
where we could actually act, because things had to really crumble like to
Uh-huh.
ground zero for us to be able to say, okay, we have to begin again. And I believe
Yeah.
that that's right now where
Yeah.
we're at, the building level. Okay, everything's gone, everything that we knew, just
Yeah.
forget about it and let's start over.
Yeah. So do you think that it requires or will happen or I don't know, when you say you think we're on that path now, do you think it's going to be systemic or do you think it's going to be individuals like you in their individual programs and daily work making that change, doing that rebuilding or both? I
I
mean, I don't,
I believe it's gonna be both.
yeah,
I believe that small is good, small is all. And
yeah.
right now it's just, I can't think of the book Horton Hears Hugh, who were the people, the
Oh,
little yop. We're just
yeah.
the right now. But I believe
Yeah.
it's louder than the little yap. I think there are a lot of bubbles that are growing and growing and growing, saying the same thing, believing the same thing, locking arms, and it's just growing.
Yeah.
And I think within a decade it will be totally different. And I
Yeah.
think it'll just keep going until it's systemic, because
Mhm.
it wasn't like this 5 years ago.
Yeah.
We've come a great deal. I mean, a long, long way
Yeah.
since 2020. And I just think it's going to get greater. I think it was more performative because people didn't know how to
Yeah.
behave. So they
Yeah.
were just on their best behavior, you know.
Yeah.
But now it's like, oh no, this is what we're doing and this is how we're doing it.
Yeah. Yeah. So, the next section is about disconnected discourses,
Mhm.
which is both real and also language I love. Talk about discourses feels very
Yeah.
fancy. But so you start that section talking about a speaker you heard who was kind of saying things that weren't developmentally sound
Yeah.
and
Mhm.
challenging
Mhm.
and challenging that speaker.
Mhm.
And that sort of is the introduction to your conversation about um, the disconnect sometimes between what we know about development or what we know about children and then what
Mhm.
science, quote unquote, is telling us we should
Not
be
the science.
doing.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, so you say there's been a disconnect between what we know, what we've experienced, and what we do in the field of early childhood education.
Mhm. Yeah, and that is a sore spot to me, just in our field.
Yeah,
We wanna be taken seriously, we're very, very bright. I can't stop saying, like, the responsibility that we have with
yeah,
the children that we serve, and what an impact, whether the child remembers us or not, the impact we have on their lives as
right.
they go on. But to prove our worth, we're constantly overstepping like what our brilliance is to
Uh-huh.
prove we're grade school teachers. And you
Yes,
know,
yeah, yeah,
but I can be
yeah,
brilliant with in the first 1,800 days of this child's life
yeah.
and make an impact on the rest of their lives,
Right.
and just stand in that. And so I think when you talk about, playing teacher, I think that's what happens. We
Yeah.
skip our roles and our brilliance and our genius of right now and dealing in the now, worrying about what they're going to be when they're in grade
Yeah.
school.
Yeah, I think about this a lot, as you know.
Mhm.
Um, uh, both the conversation around the first 5 years being so important for brain development,
Yeah.
and the, research that says that these years have potential for tremendous impact. And some of us, I think, just say, oh, well, just being here during these years means I'm doing those things and having that positive impact instead of
Mm.
digging deep and saying, okay, but what really should be happening in these years for that
Right.
impact to be positive
Mhm.
and not harmful? And
Yes.
I think, I get that this quest for respect, we want to make it look like school because the people we want the respect of are familiar with the school model.
Mhm.
Um, So I
Mhm.
get why we default to that, but that's not how, I mean,
It
that's
doesn't serve us.
it
It
doesn't
doesn't
serve us,
serve
it
us, it
doesn't
doesn't serve
serve
the
the children,
children.
right? We've been
Yeah.
trying it a long time, we're not getting any
Mhm.
more respect
It's not working.
anywhere.
It's not working. And I was
Yeah.
very much I'm not saying this looking like, "Oh, shame on you guys." Like, I was a member of that party,
Yeah,
and I very
me
much
too.
wanted
Yeah.
to, um and even now, knowing what I know, when Teacher Appreciation Week went
Uh-huh.
and nobody said Happy Teacher Appreciation Week, like, I felt away,
Yeah.
but it's okay because I know what I do and I know the impact that I make, and I think that's far more important that I understand the
Yeah.
value of what I'm doing than somebody comes and gives me a pat on the back. Like I tell my babies, put one hand up, put it behind your back. There you go. Give yourself a pat on the back and keep it moving.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think the argument that I hear then, I mean, I know the argument I hear then is that, well, we'll never get paid what we're worth then. Well, I mean, looking like school also isn't getting us paid what we're worth. It just isn't
It sure
working, and it's
isn't. It sure isn't.
time to
Yeah.
think differently about it.
And we can't. Oh, like so many other labors of love, you don't do it for the income, you do it for the impact.
Right.
And we make
Income's
one
nice
hell
and
of a
necessary.
impact. Please pay us. But
Yeah, yeah,
we'll still be here
yeah.
doing it for the impact that it makes on not just, I mean, it's healing work. So it's not like we're just putting all this out. We're getting it back.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Um, so you ask in your response section, is it possible, and you've kind of talked about this already, but I'm going to ask you to be more explicit about it, but
Okay.
is it
Mhm.
possible to build approaches that align with developmentally appropriate practice, honor educators, and center children?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I just was
Yeah,
talking with someone about this
yeah.
yesterday, um, about, proving the child. In fact, we were talking about Black children
Mm,
and how there was a great educator advocate who pushed for academic rigor, particularly for Black children, because she wanted Black children's brilliance to be seen.
yeah,
However, by doing that, you're excluding their joy, their
yeah.
being, their everything else. And so um, there's a way, every philosophy, that's why I no longer cling to I'm this, I'm Reggio, I'm play based, I'm this, I'm that.
Mhm.
Every single philosophy, if you center the child, you're doing it right.
Mm,
So if you're looking for rigor, if and you're doing it in a way that centers the children, it's not going to be too much.
yeah.
If you're academic based, if you're Reggio or play based or whatever, you're going to find a way. And that includes those people who don't really know what play means.
Mhm.
If we're
Okay.
centering the child, there's not going to be chaos
Yeah.
because we know what children need.
So how do we what does it look like if you're an academic focus to center the child?
Mm. It looks like being anti oppressive.
Okay.
It looks like being anti bias and anti racist.
Uh-huh.
And basically, and it looks like play.
Okay. Yeah.
And when you start doing that, you basically just have a child centered space
Uh-huh.
that has some what math thinking stations and some manipulatives and things like that, and basically
Yeah.
you're just a child space.
Yeah.
um
I think I think rigor, I don't like, I mean, I hate the word. I cringe at
Me
the
too.
word because of
Hmm.
how it's been
It
weaponized
feels
against
oppressive.
children. Yeah.
Hmm. Hmm.
And
Hmm.
because of the inequity that it leads to, so it's too
Yeah.
often.
Hmm.
Um, so I kind of decided that I'm going to start using rigor in relation or in the context of the adults. Like, are you willing to work hard enough to understand
Oh,
what
I
really serves this
love
child?
that. Now I'm
And
going to be
I
quoting you all over the place.
well,
And Heather Bernt-Santy said.
I'm just starting to think about it. But just, because I was talking about during the Ambush podcast yesterday,
Mhm.
where Liz lied to me about it being about this article, and then it was about my book, which was so funny. Um, uh, I was talking about how in writing the book, I had to learn so much more about math than I realized there was so much I didn't know really about math in
Yeah.
for children birth to 5, and in
Mhm,
writing about it I had to learn so much more about it, and that's rigor for
mhm.
me, right? I
Yes,
I have to be held to a rigorous standard of really understanding development and how children learn and what's important for them to learn during these years. The rigor's on me. I don't want to talk about it on children anymore.
I feel like I just wanna shut down my computer and start writing about that. That's a word. I love it.
Thanks. I liked it.
Yeah.
But I mean, so you talk to here. You said educators are exhausted with performative teaching tactics grounded in buzzwords, and I think that's so important to understand or to talk about or to wonder about that maybe the burnout is not coming from these kids, and maybe the I mean there are lots of things contributing to burnout, but let's admit that one of them is kind of going through the motions of performing things that we maybe don't even really believe in ourselves.
100%.
The psychic burden of spending your days doing things that don't feel successful or don't feel
Mhm.
effective or don't feel
Like, they
comfortable.
matter when
Yeah,
they don't center the child, like, who
yeah.
cares? I remember one of the big changes that I made was not resting during my break so that I could make the house so I could present the house as if no children were in it when
Ah,
their parents came for pickup. So
uh-huh.
I'm completely skipping any time to sit, any time to eat, any time to go to the bathroom so that I can make this unrealistic presentation
Yeah.
that there aren't 10 children in this house. You know? Like
Yeah. Yeah.
and just that contributes to that's not even a drip. That's like a steady stream every day that you're doing that contributes to your burnout. Like why that doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if there are a couple of dishes in your sink.
Mhm.
It doesn't matter if there's Play-Doh out on the counter because guess what? They're gonna wake up and they're gonna go get that Play-Doh again. So
Right,
like
yes. Yeah.
but you clean it up at the end of the day. Those things don't really matter. What matters is the connections that you've had with the kids, the projects that you created with the children, the meals that you made with the children. That's why those dishes are in the sink. You
Yeah.
know?
Uh-huh,
Like
yeah.
focus on what matters.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh, I think that I don't know, that's such a good example because even in childcare centers, there's busy work that the children are playing, we start doing our sanitizing toys or whatever. And I get
Mhm.
that you also don't want to work 2 hours unpaid after the center closes to do those things.
Yeah.
But there's a middle somewhere,
There's a middle.
and and
Mhm.
what you're describing is centering the children
Mhm.
because you want to honor the reality that they are there with you every day, all day, and that they're
Mhm.
busy and they're doing these wonderful things and sometimes chaotic and not wonderful things.
Yeah.
But there's
Yeah.
also it's also honoring you. Like you need to be able to have some quiet and some stillness.
Yeah.
Um,
I need that.
yeah.
And I think um I speak in a very matter of fact way, and sometimes my tone is misunderstood as like I'm coming off as I don't know, not I want to say judgmental, but like this tone that I didn't experience these things. And I just want to make it clear that whenever I talk about grace and space, it's always about the educator. Like
Yeah.
we matter.
Yes.
And even if I'm on the other side, first of all, I'm still learning every day. I'm still tripping and falling every day. Um,
Yeah.
but I understand that we do what we know how to do.
Yeah.
And so when I'm saying these things, even if I'm saying it in a way that stings for you to hear, that one is unintentional. And two, I'm saying it as like clarity as the way that it should be.
Hmm.
You deserve a break. You deserve rest.
Yeah.
You deserve to curl your feet up on the couch and stare at the wall if you want to,
Yeah.
know, because that day is long and
Yeah.
then there's no stops. If you're
Especially if
dealing
you're
with
in your home. Yeah.
yes, yes, there's no breaks. And so when I say that, it's not like, oh, I think
Okay, I think Kisa's laptop maybe died and we got cut off mid preaching. So we're back. Do you remember where you were, where you want to go next, Kisa?
Yeah, we were just talking about the fact that every educator deserves rest
Yeah.
and a break, and even if they just want to stare off into space. When I say these things and when I say them very matter of factly, it's really coming as an advocate of the educator
Hmm.
as well as the child. Like
Yeah.
I want to protect us so that someone else isn't writing a letter to the educator because they burn out. Like I'm looking out for us.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, uh, Hold on. There was something else before and I need to get there again. So you write too, the field of early education must prioritize supporting teachers and others who work with and for young children to meet their
Hmm.
own needs while also fulfilling their professional and personal callings to meet the needs of children, which is kind of what you were just talking about.
Yeah.
So
Hmm.
I think there's those little things during the day that maybe we have control over. But what's your dream for that? Like, what's your dream situation where there's systemic support for the people doing the work with young children?
My dream is the exact same dream
Uh,
that I have for children, and that's liberation.
uh-huh.
That we are no longer stuck trying to literally fill the gap between school and early education.
Mhm.
We're not stuck trying to meet their expectations, to pretend that we are people that we're not, pretend we are robots, pretend we don't have feelings
Mhm.
or a life outside of early education and children, that we have full autonomy. We can do the things that are best for children, not for a checklist, not
Mhm.
for a benchmark,
Yeah,
but for the children, and that we can find joy in our work.
yeah, yeah. Sounds like we need some anarchy.
Yep, it sure does. It sure does.
So we're at the end of the piece now, but I want to read these couple of sentences that were super powerful to me
Mhm,
that
mhm,
I have actually written. I have big flip chart paper all over my office, and
mhm.
when I read something that really hits me, I get my juicy, smelly markers out and I write it chart
I
like
love
graffiti
it.
style. So I have all this
Yeah.
flip chart graffiti around me.
Mhm.
And this is what, so let me read it.
Okay.
But you wrote, brick by brick, I invite us all to confidently embrace our ongoing growth. Let us adopt and or leave behind practices and perspectives that prioritize institutionalization over care,
Mhm,
both for children and ourselves. Our resolve will, I argue, make those frameworks of care indestructible.
mhm.
Um, we can just leave it with that quote, or you can
Yeah.
talk about it a little bit if you want to.
I I know that there's a tendency in our field to want like practical steps that you can immediately employ Monday morning, you
Mhm.
know? Um, but I do think this is gonna be a brick by brick type of uh I don't even want to say rehabilitation. Like we have to do the whole thing over
Yeah.
again, right? And so it's not gonna be fast. It's going to be a slow kind of arduous thing because anything worth having has to have a sturdy foundation.
Right.
It has to have solid walls, and you want it to take time, and you want to invest your effort in building and growing yourself, right? Um, so I think we can adopt the things when we look around. There are things from Reggio that just work.
Mhm.
There are things, if you go back to academic center, there are things when you talk about organization of the mind. It doesn't have to be put on the student now.
Mhm.
But when we create our mental schedule and things like that, there are things that work. And so if we adopt those things and leave everything else,
Mhm.
Just put it over with the other debris and keep moving. I think we can really build something that's wonderful.
Yeah.
So that was my thinking
Yeah.
when I wrote that we
Yeah.
just need to be slow and steady and patient.
Yeah. We're not good at slow. Um,
We're not good at slow.
generally, but in early
Mhm.
childhood. But I think that's why
Mhm.
the brick by brick imagery is
Mhm.
powerful, uh,
Yeah.
because we may look at just one brick on the ground and think, well, it's not the wall I want yet. It's
Right.
the full building, the full structure I
Yeah.
want yet.
Mhm.
The full structure couldn't be there without each of those bricks.
Bricks.
And
You
I
have to
think
do it.
that's
Yeah.
important. I think the imagery is good,
Mhm.
for us as to be a reminder and an encourager, like
Yeah.
not just to settle down, but also a look, it's happening.
Yeah, it really is. And it's even with the brick by brick analogy, if you think about everything that's going on around us, they're just people who are putting their bricks up.
Yeah.
And if enough people do it, we'll have something great, you know? Because
Yeah.
it'll keep stretching, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Hmm.
Well, thank you so much for writing this.
Yep.
For the honesty and the vulnerability. Like, I mean, it really is. You talk about worrying that your tone feels, some kind of way, but it just reads to me as
Mhm.
vulnerable and hopeful, and
Thank you.
but also like, but it's serious and important, and we need to give it our brains and our hearts, um, and think it through. So, I will link it in the show notes for
Thank
anyone
you.
who's thinking, I'm going to email Heather and ask her where to find this.
Yeah. Thank you. And I just
So
want to
that,
jump in and say the thing about my tone, that's really my speaking voice. I feel
yeah.
like who I am always comes through in my writing.
Yes, I definitely hear it in your voice,
Yeah.
what you've written, for sure. Yeah,
Yeah.
which is kind of
Yeah.
fun. Yeah. Well, thank you again. This
Thank
is
you.
really great, and I'm going to keep using it with people,
Thank you.
students, especially to give them. It's a good. I mean, I know I'm wrapping up, but I
Hmm.
was hesitant to use it with students because I
Hmm.
didn't want them to feel overwhelmed, but it was also an
Yeah.
important, acknowledgement of reality and the kind of deep thinking we have to do. We can't just be technicians applying the
Yeah.
strategies. We have to be
Hmm.
thinkers and feelers.
Yeah.
And
Hmm.
so it was really helpful for that. All right, we'll
Thank
be
you.
done now.
Okay.
Thank you, Kisa. And
Thank
thanks
you.
everyone for listening to another episode of That Early Childhood Nerd.
Talk to you later.